So we looked at the campaign, the Egyptian campaign of Sheshonq I, which was directed against the 10th century BCE territorial entity, what we are calling the Saulite territory, the Saulite or the chiefdom, or yes, let me use the word chiefdom, not kingdom, the chiefdom of Saul, which was centered in the Gibeon and Bethel plateau, as we see on the screen. And this campaign against it brought about the decline of this Saulite entity, not only the decline, but the abandonment of sites in this particular region. And I made mention that we do have evidence, archaeological evidence, to prove that there were actually buildings here that had fortifications. Well, I want to present that evidence today and then go some more, put some more meat on this Sheshonq, Saul, and the Saulides. So, there is a 20 by 15 kilometer Iron Age 1 site, which is north of Jerusalem. When we talk about north of Jerusalem, you're looking at the territory or the hometown of Saul, known in the Gibeon Bethel Plateau, which has been fully and thoroughly surveyed and excavated. These are the places. Those highlighted in yellow are the ones that is my focus. So when this place was excavated, they found casemate fortifications. They found it in Gibeon, in Mizpah, in Ai, and then Kibet and Dawara. Not only did they find these casemate fortifications, so the question is, why are these places that surround this Gibeon Bethel Plateau, why are there fortifications found around there and nowhere else in the highlands? Okay, we'll have to answer that question. Well, the answer is because this was the hub for Saul and his or the Saulites, his chiefdom. This was the hub that Sheshonq I actually campaigned against to break that alliance or whatever was going on there. Not only did they find casemate fortifications, they also found pottery from the layers inside these casemates. So there were these layers, and then they found pottery in them. And these date to Iron Age 1 as well. So we are there with a timeline that we are given for Sheshonq's campaign and then Saul being historically present in this territory. Also, what we found out was that these settlements were abandoned suddenly, according to the evidence, even though most Iron 1 settlements around this place continued to be inhabited without any interruption into Iron Age 2. So this is the issue. These places that we are saying that Sheshonq I campaigned and destroyed, or the settlements were abandoned, there are other settlements around that never had that effect. These settlements that had these casemate fortifications, they were abandoned suddenly. That is what the evidence showed, the archaeological evidence. Yeah. in Iron Age 1. Even though when they excavated around them, they saw that the settlements around them continued to be inhabited without any interruption. Get into the Iron Age 2. So why is this small area, why is this cluster of Iron Age 1 sites that were abandoned and significantly diminished? Why did that happen in the early Iron Age 2? This very small region. Why only this place? What is different from this place and the other places around? Even in Judah, you don't find these casemate fortifications. How can we explain the abandonment of these sites and their fortifications? Now, when we explain that, we'll be able to now conclude that, you know what? This may be the Saulides, and this may be the campaign of Sheshonq the First that we read on the walls of Egypt, and we read vaguely in our biblical text about these territories that he came against. So how can we explain the abandonment of these sites and their fortification? I think we can take a page out of Labayu. Okay, let's go to Labayu, way before Saul. We talked about how Labayu wanted to expand his territory, which he did. We talked about how these maneuvers by Labayu threatened the Egyptian interest in Canaan. And the Egyptian authorities reacted by demanding the arrest of Labayu and his allies, and that they report before the Pharaoh in Egypt. Well, what was Labayu trying to do? Labayu is trying to expand diplomatically and militarily, as we explained. He's expanding from the highlands of Shechem in all directions. And at the peak of his maneuverings, we saw that the Shechem coalition dominated not only large parts of central Canaan, they also dominated important parts. What are these important parts that would make an Egyptian pharaoh concerned? Well, Labayu and his allies controlled important sections of the international road leading from Egypt to Syria, and Mesopotamia on the coastal plain. They also controlled a section of the King's Highway in Transjordan. Look at this small map. You see the coastal plain is where you have Gaza and Jaffa. They controlled that place. And then Transjordan Plateau, where you see they controlled a section of the King's Highway in Transjordan. So what the Shechem coalition was doing was they were putting pressure on the Egyptian stronghold at Bet-Shean. If you look on the screen, you would see Bet-Shean right to the left of Megiddo. Don't forget Bet-Shean. It's important where we're going. So Shechem, or Labayu, his coalition, is putting pressure on the Egyptian stronghold at Bet-Shean and threatened to disconnect it from the Egyptian centers of Jaffa and Gaza. Gaza is all the way to the bottom left of the big map. If you go from Gaza, you go to Ashkelon to the top, and then Jaffa. These are the Egyptian administrations. So if you take, if you disconnect or you take the territory where Bet-Shean is, you've disconnected it from Gaza and then Jaffa. Yeah. So this is what Labayu is is doing. This is what his maneuvers are. He needed one more chunk of territory to gain control of much of Canaan. And this is the fertile Jezreel Valley. The Jezreel Valley, look at the small map, you see it right on top, where you have the Sea of Galilee. To your left, come down a little bit, you see the Jezreel Valley. Now, all these places that I'm mentioning is key. It's important where we are going with Saul. So Labayu wants to take this Jezreel Valley. So what does he do? He encircles the two dominating city-states, which is Megiddo and Rehoboth. He circles it. If he takes it, now he can put direct pressure on the cities in the Jezreel Valley. So everything he's doing is strategic. Now, with just the summary that I've given, I would not be surprised if you see a great similarity between the nature and mode of expansion of Labayu of Shechem in the 14th century. You're looking at the late Bronze Age. So if you see similarities in the late Bronze Age between the nature and mode of expansion of Shechem under Labayu and his sons, and then in the 10th century BCE with Saul, you would notice that they are the same and you will not be mistaken. It's like Labayu left a blueprint in the 14th century. And we see the Saulite territorial entity, the house of Saul, in the 10th century doing almost the same thing. Both of them advanced from their highlands hub, which would be Gibeon and Bethel for Saul, to the western slopes. So this will be Gibeon for Saul. What he does is that both advance from their hub to the western slopes of the Gilead in the Transjordan area, threatening the cities in the Jezreel Valley, where Shechem or where Labayu wanted to take over. And then they also intervened in the Shephelah in the south. And this is when Egypt comes in to halt this maneuver. Why halt it? Well, we know that there was a revived Egyptian interest in Canaan in the early days of the 22nd dynasty. And the expanding Saulite political entity to the north into the Jezreel Valley or its margins, which will be near the traditional old Egyptian stronghold of Beshin, and to the south, near the international road on the coastal plain, posed a threat to the revived Egyptian interest in Canaan in the early days of the 22nd dynasty. Just as Labayu's maneuver posed a threat to the then pharaohs, Akhenaten being one of them, here too, Saul's maneuver, almost following the blueprint of Labayu, also posed a threat to the Egyptian pharaohs who had a revived interest in Canaan. So what did they do? Sheshonq I decided to intervene. making the highlands entity a major target of his campaign. So he assaulted the hub of this growing formation around Gibeon, as well as the most important centers of its eastern flank in the areas of the Jabbok River. The Jabbok River is going to be on the big colorful map, is going to be where Penuel is. You see where it says River Jordan? If you go up there, where Penuel is, that will be your Jabbok River. So he campaigns against it, and he took over the towns of the Jezreel Valley. So just as Labayu was doing, Saul is doing the same. And just as Labayu is halted, Sheshonq the first also campaigns to put a stop to what was happening in the highlands at this time. So with this background, we can now go into the biblical text and let it now make sense from a historical point of view. Let's read 1 Samuel 28. The Philistines mastered, and they marched to Shunem and encamped. And Saul gathered all Israel, and they encamped at Gilboa, a very important place. Put that in your spirit. When Saul saw the Philistine force, his heart trembled with fear. And Saul inquired of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, but Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh did not answer him, either by dreams or by Urim or by prophets. Then Saul said to his courtiers, "Find me a woman who consults ghosts, so that I can go to her and inquire through her." And his courtiers told him that there was a woman in Endor who consulted ghosts. Okay. Just a in passing question. Which verse here is historical? And which verse here is just the theological insertion? Or which verses?
The ghosts. Let's see. And Saul inquired of Yah, but Yah did not answer him. That's theology.
Okay.
Then Saul said to his courtier, yeah, all of that. Everything from there to the end.
So from 5 to 7?
The reason why he went to, hold on a second, and his courtiers told him that the reason why he went to Endor is theology.
Okay. So the only historical verse that we have is verses 4. The Philistines mastered, and they marched to Shunem and encamped. And Saul gathered all Israel, and they encamped at Gilboa. So we have a battle. The text is telling us that is the Philistines. We'll address that. But that is, verses 4 is a historical account. Verses 5 to 7 is all theological insertion. So to convey the message, they have this theological insertion there. Okay. My focus here is Gilboa. Okay. Put that in your spirit. We go to 1 Samuel 29. And the Philistines mastered all their forces at Apec, while Israel was encamped at the spring in Jezreel. So we now have a mention of a place, the Jezreel Valley, that we were dealing with historically. It's important. This is the place that Labayu attempted to expand to, and he was stopped. It's extremely important. He has circled Megiddo and Rehob. After taking those places, he will be able to put pressure on the Jezreel Valley. Okay. The book of Samuel has preserved a historical tradition, which is coming from the north, and it's telling us that, yes, actually, there is this, standoff, or this battle scene that is actually taking place at this Jezreel Valley. Okay. Put that in your spirit. Verse 11. Accordingly, David and his men rose early in the morning to leave, to return to the land of the Philistines, while the Philistines marched up to Jezreel. So what's happening is I've removed all the theology where David did not want to go fight. He went to chase Amalek. I've removed all of that. We have a battle scene and we have a historical account of this battle that is going to take place. Okay, let's move on. 31. The Philistines attacked Israel, and the men of Israel fled before the Philistines, and many fell on Mount Gilboa. The next day, the Philistines came to strip the slain, and they found Saul and his 3 sons lying on Mount Gilboa. They cut off his head and stripped him of his armor, and they sent them throughout the land of the Philistines to spread the news in the temples of their idols and among the people. They placed his armor in the temple of Ashtaroth, and they impaled his body on the wall of Bethshean. How? Okay. Bethshean. What do we know about Bethshean?
Egyptians held that, no?
It's an Egyptian post. It's an Egyptian. It's an Egyptian fort. It's an Egyptian administrative fort. I am making my case that this is Egypt, not the Philippines. This is Egypt, Sheshonq the first campaign, and not a Philistine-led attack. It's an Egyptian one. Every historical place that I mentioned with Shechem, we've seen it play a role in the biblical text. The historical tradition has been preserved. It's just knowing the historical account from the time of the Amarna letters and knowing how to piece it together, removing all the other stuff. So this is what we have. We have Saul's territory that he ruled. We see it goes all the way up there to Mount Gilboa. That is where we are told that they went to fight. So he is in his territory. What is he doing all the way up there? He's pushing to the Jezreel Valley. So that is where Sheshonq the First campaigns all the way up north. Why? They have a fort there. And we are told that Saul fell. And where did they hang his body? On the wall of the Egyptian administrative center in Bethshean. Now we can answer some questions. Now some things come to light. We now know why there was a preserved memory that Saul died in battle on Mount Gilboa, which is far from the hub of his territory, around Gibeon. Look at the distance. It's all the way down here in Shechem. He goes all the way to Mount Gilboa. What for? Because they were extending, they were occupying the territory. We now know that his corpse was displayed on the wall of Bethshean, which is an ancient Egyptian stronghold in the valley. It's not a Philistine stronghold, it's an Egyptian stronghold. And we now know that the fall of Saul was from an Egyptian army, possibly assisted by Philistine city-states. That would be the correct statement. Egypt is driving this. They may have had help from the Philistines. It's not the Philistines driving this. So why is the biblical text telling us that it was the Philistines? Well, because when the material was put in writing, Egypt was already long gone. But the Philistines were a current reality. So the Philistines now take over the role of Egypt in the story. Because this is one big clue that we know it wasn't the Philistines. Because the notion of a Philistine league of cities, the league is an important word, a Philistine league of cities capable of assembling a great army is influenced by Greek realities. Mr. Jason mentioned this, of late monarchic times close to the compilation of the story. Remember what we said when we were dealing with the Philistines, the 5 lords of the Philistines in the book of Joshua. We said that this reference to this manner of organization is not typical in the Ancient Near East. We have this organization beginning in the 700s to the 480s BCE. This is when you would have this pentapolis, a league of cities, Philistines. 700 to 480 BCE. Saul is dead and long gone. They are not set up in such a way to be able to go against Saul. But by the 7th century, this phenomenon had become a widespread phenomenon in Greece and Western Asia Minor. So in the late Iron Age 1, what we're dealing with, no Philistine city could assemble a force strong enough to march that far north as Bet-Shean. Not possible. We know Egypt could do it. And we know of Sheshonq the first campaign. And he tells us where he campaigned to. He was in the Jezreel Valley. Why is he there? Because we are told of a battle on Mount Gilboa where the Saulides who are taking territory, the same territory that Labayu of Shechem was trying to take. And there we are told that Shaul fell, and there we are told that his head is, or his body is hanged on the Egyptian wall in the Egyptian fort of Bet-Shean. So we've been able to put all the data together. We've gone outside of the text, looked at the historical perspective, we've come into the text, and we've picked up the historical traditions that has been preserved, and we've come up with this historical picture.
Rabbi, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, sir.
So it appears that Egypt was not concerned about the south so much. They were more concerned about the north.
100%.
Right? Because there was more things going on in the north. The south is a little guy.